In the Great Hall of the Galactic Assembly, where starlight filtered through crystalline walls, and the whispers of 1,000 worlds wove a symphony of diplomacy, the arrival of humanity had been an anomaly. No guardian entity had introduced them, no divine patron spoke for them, and yet they came. Scarred, resilient, and offering friendship with hands forged in both creation and destruction. For centuries, the Assembly had observed humanity with fascination. Earth, their home, was a death world by every metric. Tectonic upheavals, volatile weather, predators that stalked with deadly efficiency, and pathogens that evolved faster than defenses could be built. And yet, humanity thrived. They built civilizations atop the ruins of their predecessors, rose from ashes of self-inflicted wars, and reached the stars not with divine guidance, but through stubborn ingenuity. The Zothran, however, saw none of this as strength. Forged by a god of conquest, the Zothran were a race bred for domination. Their guardian, the Warlord Eternal, had gifted them with the tools of subjugation, and they saw humanity's lack of a guiding deity as a fatal weakness. To them, humanity was a species ripe for conquest, their open arms seen as an invitation for chains. So they declared war. The Galactic Assembly watched in muted horror. Humanity had come to the stars preaching unity and peace, but they were ill-equipped for a war against a species so practiced in conquest. The Zothran fleets advanced, their weapons bristling with divine blessings and technological superiority, and humanity's colonies began to fall, one by one. It was then, at humanity's darkest hour, that their ambassador stood before the Assembly. Her name was Mira Solis, a diplomat who had charmed even the most xenophobic species with her wit and warmth. But today her face was pale, her voice a steel edge as she addressed the gathered delegates. "We have asked for peace. We have pleaded for reason. And now we call upon our oldest opponent." A ripple of confusion swept through the Assembly. Opponent? Humanity had no guardian. Mira raised her hands, and her voice became a shout that echoed across the chamber. "Come, Death! Humanity calls upon you!" For a moment, there was silence. Then the lights dimmed, and the air grew heavy with an ancient primal presence. Shadows coalesced in the center of the chamber, taking form. A tall, cloaked figure with eyes like twin black holes, a scythe resting against her shoulder. Death. She was beautiful and terrifying, her voice a melody of ruin as she laughed, a sound that chilled even the Zothran emissary to his core. The Great Hall fell silent as Death loomed over the Assembly, her presence suffocating and electric. But instead of addressing the galaxy's collective awe, her black hole gaze turned to Mira Solis, the human ambassador. "Well, well," Death began, her voice laced with a kind of sardonic affection. "Look who finally called me. I was beginning to think you'd forgotten me entirely." Mira crossed her arms, meeting Death's gaze without flinching, though there was a steeliness in her posture. "Oh, don't flatter yourself. We've been a little busy, you know, surviving all the fun you've thrown our way." "Fun?" Death let out a delighted laugh that sent shivers through the Assembly. "Oh, is that what you call it? Tell me, Mira, did you enjoy the Ice Ages? Those were my personal favorites. Watching your kind huddle in caves, fighting over scraps of meat. Truly, a masterpiece." Mira arched an eyebrow. "Oh, you mean the Ice Ages where we learned to tame fire, develop tools, and paint the first images of our dreams on cave walls? The ones that force us to cooperate and invent? Yes, thanks for that. Without those, we might never have discovered art or the scientific method." Death smirked, clearly amused. "Fine, but what about the Black Death? That was one of my finest works. A little pestilence to weed out the weak and complacent." Mira leaned forward, her tone sharp. "Ah yes, the plague. You know, that's the one where we figured out quarantine, public health systems, and eventually germ theory. We even built whole medical disciplines around stopping you in your tracks. Sure, millions died, but the survivors became stronger, smarter and more connected. You're really not very good at this, are you? The assembly delegates exchanged uneasy glances. It was like watching a child tease a star about its brightness. Death rolled her eyes, though the smirk on her face remained. Oh, please, don't pretend you were doing so well. 2 world wars, nuclear weapons. You barely made it out of the last century alive. Mira's eyes narrowed and her voice softened to a dangerous edge. You mean the wars that spurred us to build international alliances, codify human rights and map the stars? The ones that gave us the technologies we're using right now to address this assembly? Face it, you've thrown your worst at us, and all you've done is make us stronger. Death tilted her head, as if genuinely considering Mira's words. Then she chuckled, a low rumbling sound that seemed to echo from the void itself. Oh, Mira, you are delightful. Do you know how many species I've broken? Countless. How many gave up the moment they faced extinction? Almost all of them. But you... She pointed a bony finger at Mira. You keep getting up. I hurl asteroids, unleash plagues, stir wars, and yet here you are, standing before me, daring to sass me in front of the galaxy. That's humanity for you, Mira said with a wiry smile. Stubborn as hell, and twice as resourceful. You may have been our opponent, Death, but you've also been our greatest teacher. Every time you tried to break us, we learned how to bend instead. Death leaned closer, her dark eyes gleaming with something like pride, or perhaps hunger. Teacher, you say? I like that. But let's not forget, my dear, that you've never truly beaten me. Every one of your kind will meet me eventually. No one escapes. Mira smiled and faltered. True, but you've never beaten all of us at once, have you? And now, when someone else thinks they can finish what you started, you're the first to stand beside us. Death straightened, her cloak billowing as though caught in an invisible storm. Oh, make no mistake, Mira, I'm not doing this out of charity. I just can't resist a challenge. These Zophran think they can do what I couldn't in millennia. It's laughable. Mira shrugged. We're used to it. A lot of people underestimate us. They think peace is weakness. But you know better, don't you? You've seen us at our worst. And our best. For a moment, Death seemed to soften, her voice carrying a rare note of fondness. Indeed I have. And as much as you frustrate me, I'll admit this. I wouldn't have it any other way. The Zophran embassy, who had been frozen in shock, finally found his voice, trembling as he spoke. This is madness. You claim to be their enemy, and yet you call them your children? Death turned to him, her grin sharpening into something terrifying. Madness? No, little Zophran. This is humanity. And if you truly believe you can destroy them, you're welcome to try. But know this. Every weapon you use, every strategy you deploy, will only make them stronger. Because I spent eons trying to kill them, and all I've done is prepare them for you. Mira's voice rang out, steady and confident. The Zophran wanted war. Now they have it. And as always, humanity will rise, adapt, and overcome. Because death is our oldest adversary. And our oldest ally. Death laughed again, a sound like the tolling of 1,000 bells. Well said, Mira. Now, let's see what your galaxy's newest challengers have to offer. I could use some entertainment. And with that, Death's shadow loomed over the assembly, a silent reminder that while she may have been humanity's greatest foe, she was also their greatest testament to survival. The Zophran had declared war on a species forged in fire and tempered by death itself. The galaxy held its breath, waiting to see what would happen next.